Hello class, this is the lesson for chapter 1-2, which is adding and subtracting decimals, as well as working with the properties of addition. When adding or subtracting decimals, you have to be very sure that you align the decimal points. In other words, make sure you line them up. This will also line up your place values. Now if you'll notice in example 1, they have given us the problem horizontally. A lot of us really don't care to work horizontally, so my recommendation is rewrite it and then line up your decimal points, remember, when you rewrite. Now you'll notice that your bottom addend is 1.882. That's 3 place values. So what I find helpful is to add a couple of zeros behind the 19.1, and I need to add 1 0 behind the 2.310. Now I know it's a little easier for me to follow and line up what I'm supposed to add. 0, 0, and 2 is 2. 1 and 8 is 9. 3 and 1 is 4, and 8 make 12. So I write down the 2, bring down the decimal point, and carry the 1. Now here's where I use some properties, and I say to myself, you know, it's a lot easier for me to deal with 1 plus 9, because that's 10. So 1 plus 9 is 10, plus 2 is 12, plus 1 is 13, and then I'm going to carry the 1, and I get 23.292. I would encourage you at this point to hit pause, and then do example 2. Okay, class, how did you do? I put in red where the decimal point behind the 10 should be, and adding my zeros. Now, that's a point that perhaps I should make, is that if you have a whole number like the 10, where's the decimal point? Well, it's just to the right of the number. Subtraction works very much the same way. We're going to take 36.901 and subtract 27.824. Now in this problem, we already have 3 decimal places after the decimal point, so we don't have to add any extra zeros. But if you'll notice, I can't take 1 minus 4 in this type of problem setting, nor can I take 0 minus 2. And it's not going to do me any good to try to borrow from the 0 or regroup. Where I'm going to regroup is from that 9/10. I'm going to cross that off. That's going to become an 8. I carry that tenths over, but I'm going to have to regroup again to make that an 11. 11 minus 4 is 7. 9 minus 2 is 7. 8 minus 8 is 0. Don't forget to bring that decimal point straight down. Now here's where I can do 36 minus 27 in my head. Some of you cannot. If you can't, you have to regroup again. That's a 1 there. Didn't show up very well. 16 minus 7 is 9, so my difference here is 9.077. One of the places where I can use addition and subtraction of decimals is in working with something like a menu, where they give you menu choices, but there's no way here for me to say, well, what if I only want a cookie? Yes, I can get a hot dog, chips, milk, hot dog, chips, milk, cookie, hot dog, milk, hot dog, chips, but what if I just want to buy a cookie? How would you figure out the cost? If I look at this carefully, I can see that the only difference between item choice 1 of hot dog, chips, and milk and item choice 2, hot dog, chips, milk, cookie, is the cookie. So if I subtract those 2 choices, take my 2.25, remember that standard subtraction is to put the number with the greater value at the top. I'm going to subtract the 2. Now notice I'm going to put my decimal point in and my 2 zeros just to help me. 5 minus 0 is 5, 2 minus 0 is 2. Bring that decimal point straight down. You do not really have to write that 2 minus 2 is 0 if you do not want to. But since we are working with money, it would be pretty important for you to put in a $ sign at this point. Can you figure out how to find the cost of the milk? Yes. Item choice 1 says hot dog, chips, milk, chips and milk, where the last item just says hot dog chips. Notice I'm always trying to find a place where the only difference I have is the one I want to find. The only difference here is milk. So I'm going to take my $2 and subtract $1.50. 0 minus 0, I need to regroup. 10 minus 5 is 5. Bring that decimal point straight down. And I have 50 cents. How am I going to find the chips? Well, really, I know hot dogs, I know what milk costs, I know what cookies cost, and there's really no way that I can figure some of this out without finding out the hot dog. And that's what I want to find in D. So you know what? I'm going to find that one first. Because I'm going to say, hey, I know now that milk is 50 cents, and I know that a hot dog and milk is $1.60. So I'm going to take that $1.60 and subtract the 50 cents. And I'm going to find out that my hot dog is going to cost me $1.10. Now I can use that to find the chips. Because if I know that the hot dog is $1.10, I go to hot dogs and chips, I can take the $1.50 minus that $1.10 for the hot dog, and I now know that my chips are 40 cents. So sometimes when you're solving problems, it's a good thing to read over the whole problem, and maybe finding a later part can help you find an earlier part in the problem. Let's move on to properties of addition. Properties of addition, we have 3 of them. The first one is identity, which just simply says if I add 0 to a number, I'm just going to get the number. 5.6 plus 0 is 5.6. Now, because you are starting to move towards secondary math, we also talk about the algebra principle, that if I have an A, which can stand for any number, and I add 0 to it, I'm just going to get that number. The commutative property is extremely powerful and so helpful. It says that you can change the order of the addends without changing what the sum is. 2.3 plus 4.7 is going to be the exact same thing as 4.7 plus 2.3. If I take that 7 plus 3, I'm going to get a 0 and carry 1. 2 and 4 and 1 make 7. And over here, 7 plus 3 is going to give me a 0, carry that 1, and 4 plus 2 plus 1 is 7. So it's going to be pretty helpful. So why do we even have it? Because for some people, it's harder to do 3 plus 7 than it is to do 7 plus 3. And sometimes you're given 3 numbers in the problem, and you can move one of those numbers next to another addend in the problem, and it'll make 10, or it'll make 20, or it'll make 30. Another very powerful property is the associative property. Here it says you can change the grouping of the addends without changing the sum. Now you'll notice that this is the one with parentheses. Let's look at the first part of this problem, 2.5 plus 6. If you remember, you're supposed to do that first because it's inside the parentheses. Well, that would give us 8.5. And then we're supposed to take 8.5 plus 4. Now for some students, that can be kind of difficult. But look what happens over on this right side. All I've done is change the parentheses and said, hey, if I take 6 and 4, I'm going to get 10. And boy, I can add stuff to 10 like nothing. So if I take 10 plus 2.5, I'm going to get my 12.5. And to me, it's easier. All I had to do was change the parentheses. What it does, what this property does, is give you the power to change numbers that you associate or group together. Now, a lot of times I combine the ideas. Let's look at example 1 here. I've got a 0.7, a 12.5, and a 1.3. In my brain, I see 1.3 and 0.7 is going to be 2. So I can use the commutative property to rewrite. I'm going to shift that 12.5 to the left and move that 0.7 next to the 1.3. Then I'm going to put in parentheses that say, hey, if I take 0.7 plus 1.3, I'm going to get 2. Now I can add those two numbers very easily and get 14.5. Let's look at our last example here in this particular lesson. If you notice, this 4.4 and this 0.6 is going to give me a 5. So I'm going to rewrite the problem to put that 0.6 closer to the 4.4. And then I'm going to mentally or physically put in parentheses to tell me, hey, I'm going to add that first. And what I'm going to get here is 5. Now I have 5 plus 5.3, and it's pretty easy to see that that's going to be 10.3. Now that's a whole lot easier than trying to take 4.4 plus 5.3, which is 9.7, and then take 9.7 plus 0.6. So it's all about how you can move the numbers around and the power that you have from the commutative property and the associative property to do that. And that concludes lesson 1.2.